Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY and the Lucy Ann Lance Show. And our segment with Damian on Design. Today we are going to take a look at Michigan's past and future.
And future, yep.
And the importance of historic preservation in our state.
And also the importance of the modern era of architecture and design, and how Michigan has played a role in that nationally and internationally, actually.
And joining us this morning is Brian Conway, State Historic Preservation Officer. Brian was appointed Michigan's State Historic Preservation Officer back in 1997. You're trained as an architect.
Yes.
You're out of the Taubman School here at the University
Yes.
of Michigan.
Yes.
Welcome. It's nice to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you both. It's very nice to be here this morning.
What is the state of preservation right now here in Michigan?
Well, there's a lot going on. In particular, we've taken a real close look at the next wave of architecture that we need to be concerned about, and that's the architecture that's now 50, 60 years old from the mid-century, 20th century. We launched a project called Michigan Modern several years ago to take a close look at Michigan's role in the development of modernism. And as it turns out, we kind of knew this, but our research has really proven that Michigan did play a very significant role in the development of modernism, both in architecture, furniture design, and design in general. So we launched this project to take a look at this, to flesh out the story, and reclaim Michigan's importance in the design industry. And it really serves as the foundation for the very strong design industry that still exists here in Michigan.
As Damian and I have talked in the past, the city of Ann Arbor has quite a few homes from that era, and we've noted that as they go for sale, it is a badge of honor to say
mid-century modern.
They are mid-century modern homes.
Yes. Well, Ann Arbor is really unique because of the University of Michigan there, and the University of Michigan played a real important role in the story of modernism development. Ann Arbor is fortunate in that they had architects right there at the university that on the side designed houses for faculty and others in the community. So there's several neighborhoods that are just filled with houses from this period. And up to this point, they really haven't been appreciated because they weren't quite old enough and people really didn't understand them, but they're coming of age now, and people are understanding the value and the real joy and beauty and design excellence of some of these houses. And they exist. Certainly there's a good collection in Ann Arbor, but they're all over the state. And that was part of our goal, was to start to bring this story to light so that people had a better understanding of the importance of this period. We did see some losses. We saw some threats to this type of architecture, and that really kind of put it on our radar screen as we needed to take a look at this and try to get the story out there so people had an appreciation for this period of architecture.
We're all familiar with the buildings that have been restored and the preservation that's gone on in our cities and towns and villages, because these buildings, they mark an important part of the fabric of our, and the familiarity, right? Things that we're familiar seeing, landmarks that we live. But it doesn't just end there, right? It's not just about the presence of these buildings and preserving them. There's a lot more to it, isn't there? I mean, as far as the workforce that these kind of projects bring together, the tracking of technologies, of building technologies, the historic from the decorative arts and so on. If we look at buildings like the Michigan State Capitol and the work that was done there, and then moving now into this modern era.
Right. There's a tremendous amount of craftsmanship that's involved or that was involved in the creation of historic properties, and a lot of the materials and design and craftsmanship just simply could not be reproduced today. It'd just be far too expensive. So I think through our work in the State Historic Preservation Office, we always encourage the rehabilitation of historic buildings rather than just the demolition and replacement, because so often these buildings are just irreplaceable. You just could not construct something of that same quality. Yeah. When we get to the modern period, I think there's not quite an appreciation yet of the quality of some of the architecture. There's also are some challenges with buildings from the mid-century, mid-20th century, in that oftentimes they were using new and unusual materials in their buildings. experimenting.
Yeah.
We saw a great expansion of new and modern materials coming out of World War II.
Yeah.
Some of those maybe were not the best materials to be used at times, but the challenge today for architects and others involved with historic rehabilitation of those buildings from that period is to come up with a substitute material or something that provides the same outward appearance but may have a longer lifespan.
Can you give us an example of what you're talking about and the difference in those materials?
Well, for example, one of the earliest curtain wall assemblies was at the General Motors Technological Center in Warren. And what did they use to seal the windows, but were the same type of seals that were used on automobiles, automobile windshields. And it was successful, but now we're finding that, after a certain period of time, those seals just do not, they disintegrate and just do not hold up.
Mm.
There are, obviously, technologies change so dramatically that there are materials that can be substituted that will provide a much better seal. So obviously, curtain walls are assembled in a completely different way today. But then
we see that with windows in
Yes.
homes from that era too, because one of the characteristics are these large expanses of glass.
Mhm.
Yes.
So the technology had evolved which allowed us to literally float large expanses of glass, which, we'd always had small windows because you couldn't make large pieces of glass, right?
Right.
The glass drove the windows, and now we could.
Exactly.
But we didn't have the technology ready to make insulated glass, sealed glass panes. So you get the thin glass, single panes, sometimes double, but then again that sealing technology of pane to pane wasn't there, and so they started to leak. A lot of the details were adventurous, to say
Right,
the least.
exactly.
So they put windows down close to the floor, close to the ground with snow pooled up, rain
Right.
pulled up as well. So those kinds of things.
Exactly. So the challenge today, when you have those large sheets of single-pane glass, is how do you retrofit them with insulated glass without destroying some of the fine details of the
Yeah.
building. But it certainly can be done with some good architect and some creativity.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Lucy Ann Lance Show and our Damian on Design segment each weekend here with Damian Farrell from Damian Farrell Design Group. And our special guest today is Brian Conway, State Historic Preservation Officer with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. As a side note, when you look at preservation and you talk about saving these glorious buildings, no matter what era they're from, how do you do that when in the city of Detroit they have other issues they're trying to contend with, and that's kind of bringing in neighborhoods, not having it be so widespread, building a better city, a city that works better, but yet you have these glorious mansions or these dilapidated buildings that back in the heyday were really incredible. What do you do about that?
Well, it is a challenge. Historic preservation really is all about real estate development.
Mm-hmm.
It's market-driven. We do have incentives to encourage the reinvestment in historic properties. There are federal income tax credits, for example, related to the rehabilitation of historic properties. Specifically, a developer or property owner can claim 20% of a rehabilitation project as a direct credit against federal income taxes owed, which is a very substantial incentive. The intent was, of course, to make the rehabilitation of historic buildings more on the level of new construction, to provide that incentive because of the challenges sometimes, but the federal tax credits do provide the challenges. So when you look at any of the major projects that are happening in Detroit right now, around Grand Circus Park,
Right.
or in Midtown, those, for the most part, are all taking advantage of those federal income tax credits. We formerly did have a state tax credit that was available for both commercial and residential properties, but right now we do not have such an incentive. So there really is nothing right now to help a homeowner. So you're correct. It is a challenge in many communities when you have these very large, ornate homes for someone to be able to keep them up. It takes a lot of love.
Are there any initiatives brewing or growing or things on the horizon that could help homeowners?
Well, the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, which is a nonprofit statewide preservation advocacy organization, is looking at what other opportunities there might be. I think anything would take some legislative action. But
Okay.
they are the organization that is taking a close look at that and working with their legislators to come up with some other alternatives that could provide an incentive for homeowners. So we're hopeful.
Into them, don't they?
Yes.
The landscape, the streetscape tends to be well established, and that contributes to that sense of permanence and comfort
Right.
that people look for in neighborhoods.
Exactly. And then we've also seen neighborhoods that have been down and out, and they get their historic designation, both the National Register designation, which enables the federal tax credits that I just mentioned, and the local designation. And we see those neighborhoods start to turn around. Once you have an investor who may be encouraged or somehow incentivized to invest in a building, it's kind of a domino effect,
Yeah.
which absolutely we see in places like Midtown in Detroit,
Yeah.
or Hartside in Grand Rapids, where it took the quote urban pioneer to go in there and invest in a building, and pretty soon, you know, the neighbor does, and on down the street, and we start to see the entire neighborhood come back, and the property values go back up. Right
Yeah.
now, it's you can hardly find a place to live in Midtown.
Very,
Yeah.
very desirable place. Yeah.
Brian, you had the opportunity recently to present 12 recipients with the 2014 Governor's Awards for Historic Preservation. Tell us a little
Yes.
bit about those.
Well, each year we select approximately 5 or 6 projects throughout the state that represent all of the great historic preservation projects that occur, and we honor them with awards under the governor's name, and the award ceremony is held in the state capitol rotunda. So it's a very wonderful place, very majestic kind of a place to hold this kind of award, and it's a great honor. This year, for example, we gave an award to Wayne State University for their outstanding work on the restoration of the water features or pools surrounding the McGregor Memorial Conference Center there at Wayne State University.
Okay.
That building was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, most well known, of course, for his design of the World Trade Center. And he was based right here in Troy, Michigan.
Yeah.
First in Detroit, then later in Troy. And he is a world-renowned architect that most people wouldn't know that his offices and his work came out of Michigan.
Yeah.
And many of his buildings, like the McGregor Conference Center or the Consolidated Gas Building at 1 Woodward Avenue in Detroit, had water features associated with them as part of their design. So we are very fortunate in that Wayne State University was able to raise funds to restore that water feature, and it's just an outstanding feature now on Wayne State University campus.
Brian, switching to the Michigan Modern exhibit, I'm looking at the agenda of things, and this is what's so exciting about Michigan. And Luciana and I have talked for the last couple of years about Michigan as a state of design. It's been a theme for us. But I look through the ledger here, if you will, of people coming to talk, and fabric artist, the work of George Nakashima, who was so well known for his beautiful wood furniture and the Whitcomb Furniture Company, all the way down to the fiberglass boat industry here in Michigan, very famous on the west side. The work of Balthasar Korab. I had the pleasure of working with alongside him on a couple of our buildings that were photographed when he was alive. Remarkable man.
Yes.
The influence of Michigan on California modernism.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that's a connection with people like Ray and Charles Eames.
Yes.
So it's extraordinary, the depths, all the way from fabric to furniture, not just architecture, boat design, car design. This is powerful stuff.
Exactly, and I think that Michigan gets overlooked. You think of New York, or you jump to Los Angeles,
Yep.
and you skip over
And what's in
Michigan
the
and
middle?
the Midwest, right? And we're here, and certainly when we look at this foundation of modern design that occurred here, just did not occur anywhere else in the country. There was things happening here. Obviously, the auto industry.
Yeah.
In the early 20th century, really coming to a head in the post-World War II era. We had, and then on the west side of the state, the furniture industry and everything associated with that, together with the well-known educational institutions such as Cranbrook, which attracted talent, young talent from around the world to come here. And the University of Michigan. Most people don't realize that the University of Michigan was one of the first professional architectural programs to delve into modernism.
Yeah.
And that's because of Emil Lorch, one of the first deans, came to Michigan from Chicago, and he had been associated with the Chicago School of Architecture, Frank Lloyd Wright, and others. And he brought the concept of pure design to the University of Michigan and started to build that into the curriculum, while most every other architectural program was still kind of stuck on neoclassicism or classical revival. So together with Cranbrook and University of Michigan, the designers associated with the auto industry, the designers associated with the furniture industry, plus the wealth that those industries brought to Michigan, created this synergy that just did not exist anywhere else. And design talent was attracted to Michigan. And that design talent and those industries still exist today from that base.
So why are we forgotten then? Why are
That's
we
a good question.
that,
Very
that
good question.
state that is skipped over? And
Well, I'll tell you what really got me going on this was there was an exhibition in Los Angeles, and the title was something like Los Angeles, the Birth of Cool. And I looked at their catalog, and I said, oh my God, on the cover of the catalog, it's all Michigan products. And I said, that's it. We got to tell our own story. I think that part of it, I think, is that most architectural history books were the ones that are still the well-used books in teaching today came out of the early post-World War II era, the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And this is when this was all occurring in Michigan and just was not recognized. And I think that through this study and others taking note, I think that that chapter of history is being rewritten.
Yeah.
We had architects like Albert Kahn, who was here because of the auto industry or gained his fame with the auto industry. He was designing the factory buildings that the entire world was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the German or the European architects that are most credited with modernism. What were they looking at? They were looking at Albert Kahn and what he was designing.
Yeah.
So they were looking at Michigan.
Yeah.
But the story comes out that it was all happening in Europe. It wasn't happening here.
I've had it.
So they skipped that little chapter. And part of it was also because Albert Kahn himself felt that factory architecture was for factory purposes or utilitarian purposes, and he did not apply it to his residential or his other work. Whereas the Europeans,
beautiful elegance.
oh,
factory
absolutely,
structures.
but the Europeans then took that model and transferred it to commercial and residential, which did not happen with Albert Kahn.
Brian, if modern represents what era? The 19...
Roughly, we're saying 1940 through 1970, very roughly. But obviously, things occurred much earlier that led up to what was happening in the pre-World War II and post-World War II years.
So if that is considered modernism, the modern era, what is today?
Well, now you're getting into architectural history. We had modernism, and then probably in the late 70s, early 1980s, there was a reaction to modernism, which is commonly today called postmodernism, which tended to, once again, fall back to classical motifs, although used in a very modernistic and forward-thinking way. And that kind of, started a new trend. What do we have today? I tend to think that some of the work that we see coming out of architectural studios is still a following of what I would call, what would I call it? I'm blanking on that now, but more of an expressionistic kind of architectural style, which really was one component of modernism. We had architects like Errol Saarinen, again coming right out of Michigan. He was experimenting with forms and materials, and he created such masterpieces like the TWA terminal and St. Louis Arch, etc., which really was expressionistic. And we see some of the the architecture today, which has no boundaries, no straight lines. That to me is a follow through of that expressionistic.
I think residential, we're seeing a resurgence of the modern era.
Yes.
I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had the editor-in-chief of Dwell magazine.
Yes.
And Dwell has really built themselves and their upcoming design conference as well on the whole idea of modernism, right?
Absolutely.
And again, all the way from fabrics to furniture to houses to lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And so we're also seeing that resurgence, but it's such an exciting time technologically now as well. So I think architects are experimenting with everything we are being presented with for expressionism. I think that's what it is.
Absolutely.
But I'm loving this resurgence of residential modern, lots of light, which is so great for Michigan.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You know, in our light-deprived climate, right?
Right.
Lots of light.
Well, I
Open
think-
flowing, easy plans, very simple.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right that there is a renewed interest in
Yeah.
that, and I think that's why we're finding that there's a renewed interest in this historical basis or
Yeah.
background that we're telling. We're telling
Yeah.
that story because of that popular interest.
Yeah.
As you mentioned,
Mhm.
Ann Arbor houses, for example,
Right.
that's that popular interest.
Yeah.
And we found that we have a website, it's called michiganmodern.org,
Mm-hmm.
and we have several different websites, but we're finding that website, because of the topic and because of its connection to what's popular today, is our most popular website. And it's attracting a whole new audience of
Yeah.
younger people that perhaps were not involved with preservation
Yeah.
up to this point.
Brian Conway, State Historic Preservation Officer with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. It's a part of the MISTA offices, which provides financial and technical assistance through public and private partnerships to create and preserve decent, affordable housing for low and moderate income residents, and to engage in community economic development activities to revitalize our urban and rural communities. And it's been a pleasure talking with you today on Damian on Design. Fascinating. It takes
Thank you.
50 years, though, for something to be considered.
Generally 50 years. I would like to mention, if I could, we have a symposium coming up in Grand Rapids at the
Right.
Kendall College of Art and Design.
Very important.
And it's,
yes.
it's entitled Michigan Modern, Design That Shaped America. As
Yep.
we've discussed, many of the things coming out of Michigan really did shape America. Think
Yeah.
of your automobile and your furniture and architecture, etc. That was coming out of Michigan. So the symposium is at the the Kendall College of Art and Design in Grand Rapids, June 19th through 21st. And we're holding a companion exhibition at the Grand Rapids Art Museum under the same title of Design That Shaped America. It's a fantastic exhibition featuring many, many products that were designed and manufactured here in Michigan, such as fiberglass boats, which
Yep.
came out of western Michigan.
Yep.
Surprising to me, the pop-up tent that we all utilize was designed by a Cranbrook graduate in the 50s. I thought it
Really?
was fairly recent, but in the 50s. Many, many other very interesting things. So I would encourage all your listeners to go to our website and sign up for the symposium and absolutely get to Grand Rapids to see the exhibition, which runs through August 24th.
And give us the website again?
MichiganModern.org.
MichiganModern.org. What is this on the cover?
This is the kitchen of an Alcoa aluminum house in Grand Rapids. It was designed by an architect named Goodman, I believe, and it was part of a program by Alcoa Aluminum to...
Is that what the cabinets and...
Mhm, it's all aluminum.
Because I could not place it. I'm looking at this. This looks like something from the
Beautiful.
future. doesn't it?
Well, it-
Well, of course, the intent of the house was for the aluminum company to advertise all of its products. So that
Oh, wow.
aluminum is
Versatility.
used throughout the house,
Yeah.
and this was one of several houses that were built throughout the country by Alcoa. We're fortunate that this one is in Grand Rapids. It is fully restored.
Beautifully preserved, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, it's just... when you see something that you haven't seen before,
Yes,
it really...
it strikes you.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. And this would have been from when? What?
I believe this I'm not exactly sure, I think this was sometime in the early 1960s.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? And it has that futuristic look to it.
Yes.
Michigan Modern, Design That Shaped America, the symposium coming up June 19th through the 21st, Kendall College of Art and Design in Grand Rapids. Brian Conway, pleasure talking with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
And Damian Farrell from Damian Farrell Design Group. Brian is with the State Historic Preservation Officer through the Michigan State Housing Authority. And you're listening to the Lucy Ann Lance Show, Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY. Great job. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Brian.
That was really fascinating. You were...
That was
I could
fun.
listen to you all day. Yeah. You know so much. That's wonderful.
It was fun.